Her whole life has been about trying to improve other people's lives. And with that, Eleanor, we look forward to your presentation.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me. You'll be glad the rest of our family didn't come, because there wouldn't have been enough food. We number about 99 in the immediate family. So I am, as Lee said, number 12 in the family, the one that was asked to share a few memories with you. And when I think of what in a few moments might be shared, I think we need maybe a bit of a theme. And if there's something that has been associated with Martin Luther King Jr., it's the 3 action words. I'm wondering if anybody knows what they are. Connected mostly with his holiday, the first, the Junior ROTC, repeated to us over and over again in the most beautiful ceremony, remember. Okay? Yep. And the second is what we're doing here tonight in many ways, and that is celebrating. But as Scott Brown told us, when we leave here, we need to act. So if we think first of remembering, tonight we recall a young widow and her 4 children. In the summer of 1968, Coretta Scott King had even more responsibility than before the tragedy that shook her, her family, and our nation. She was now looking for a place for her 4 children and herself, a place to heal, to play, and to escape the attention of the nation. A quiet place where she could begin writing what would in the future become her book, My Life with Martin Luther King Jr. Mike? Thank you. It so happened that a friend of the Kings knew my brother Walter and his wife Barbara Dunphy. He knew they had 4 children. He knew they had a cottage on Lake Winnipesaukee. So he contacted them, and the invitation was extended to the King family to use the Dunphy cottage. Life stories evolve from such invitations. This one included a cottage, a bunkhouse, a small boat called Putt-Putt, a lovable lab named Inky, a diving raft for swimming, and a collection of Irish and Jewish kids, Dunphys and Hirschbergs. Sounds like the makings of a school assignment, what I did on my summer vacation. And it's just that simple, but it required an invitation. And that is what we remember. We are all asked to reach out in our lives and make it possible to invite others into them. Only if we do this will we have stories to pass on and through our children and grandchildren. And so we celebrate after remembering. Is it even possible to think that we could celebrate, to laugh and play after such a family tragedy as Coretta Scott King endured? Yes, she knew she had to nurture the growing lives of her children. She was totally focused on giving them the joy of childhood, despite the threats and traumas they had endured. I brought a few pictures from that summer, the fun of summertime, in what her husband had called the prodigious hills of New Hampshire. And here were her children, were with other kids, black and white, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, discovering all they had in common. And my husband, Jim, is it coming up? Of course, it's been up all evening, so you have to expect that, you know, right at the moment, any teacher expects that. So I can dip into it whenever I can see it on your laptop. But there are only a few pictures, and that is actually because the events of that summer really weren't meant for publicity. Many people have said, I didn't ever know that the Kings were here, and that was actually the point. In fact, Walter Jr., who was all of 13, he could drive the boat, even though he couldn't drive a car. He was more or less in charge of the kids, and everyone was telling him, listen, we're supposed to try to be private. And he says, you mean to tell me, you know, you've got 4 black kids on Lake Winnipesaukee and people aren't going to wonder who they are? The more difficult part of that was they were really scared. People in our nation were frightened that someone was going to go after the children. And of course, Coretta found it very difficult to try to let them have fun and still, you know, harbor that fear. You know, Gary Hirshberg met Mrs. King many times later, and she actually asked Gary about Inky and Putt-Putt. And this was many years after that summer. She had never forgotten even the boat or the dog. And that's Walter Jr. on the right there waving, the blonde, obviously. And I believe that's Martin and the rest, the mix of people. Patrick Dunphy is to your right. And Patrick had such excitement about tonight, but his excitement is of a private sort. He wanted very much to share these pictures, and what you did by inviting this family here tonight was help us to renew that memory, and also the combination of Dunphys and Hirshbergs getting together to try to relive what happened that summer. That here is Martin with Patrick in the boat, and I believe there's one now. That's my sister-in-law Barbara on the right, Walter's wife and mother of the 4 children, and Coretta. And those of us who, you know, saw her picture in later years and look at how young she was, you know, they were only in their late 30s. And to think of the trauma and tragedy. Coretta Scott King spoke at one of our Global Citizen Circle events, and she's very quiet and meditative and reflective, and she talked about forgiveness and reconciliation and moving on. And I happened to leave the room when she finished talking, and a gentleman was coming out to get on the elevator. And he just looked at me and he said, all that holy stuff. And I don't know why I said what I said, but it came so spontaneously. I said, you know, maybe it's holy, maybe it isn't. But I guess I'd feel that if you've had your house bombed, if your children's lives have been threatened, if your own life has been as well, if your husband is on the firing line all the time, and you can still say, we must forgive, we must reconcile, we must move on, somehow I think it's credible. And that's the way Coretta was. She never preached. She just simply shared what she so truly believed. And that is the message of her husband. We need to be a beloved community, and we need to work toward it. So that, to me, is the epitome. I love that picture of Coretta Scott King. The reflection here in pictures is far richer than we can imagine today. You know, I was thinking, as I looked at these after so many years, today it would be on YouTube, you know, everything would go viral, and the privacy in that special moment would have been, well, probably could not have happened. And we're very grateful that it did get to happen. This summer was meant to allow the freedom and the fresh air of New Hampshire. New Hampshire inclusiveness. And those of us who have had the privilege of living in this state and bringing up children and grandchildren here and looking out at the young people here tonight realize what a special gift we have, but really what importance it is for us as well to act. And I must say that the fun that they had during the day would end with piling into the bunkhouse at night with Walter Jr. telling them all to get to bed, and he'd turn on the radio. Before they went to bed, he said, the 4 King children would kneel by the bunks, and they'd pray for each other, their mother, their father, and they'd pray that the police would find the man, the person who killed their father. One night, even in this quiet getaway, reality found them. The King children, after kneeling by their beds and climbing in, a news alert crackled through the cloth-covered speakers of the radio. Scotland Yard had caught the man who shot King. The kids exploded, ran down to the main cottage. "Mom, Mom," they said, "they caught him, they caught him." So here we are, 45 years later. All those kids have grown. Most are parents, even grandparents now. Barbara and Walter have passed away. But stories like the summer of '68 live on. And it is that brings us to how we act. What might that tell us as we're gathered here tonight? I think it reminds us that we leave our stories. We leave property, maybe we don't, but we all leave stories from one generation to the next. Oh, we know there are plenty of family stories of the warts and the foibles and the problems, but what kind of stories will our children share with their children? Perhaps the very best action we can take is to follow Coretta's example. Take time with our children to listen and to do things that will make significant stories for them to share going forward. Our children and their grandchildren need to learn from the stories that are passed on. We're very grateful for your invitation here tonight because you have helped us renew the memories of that very, very special summer. And I know that the best we can do is to go forward, wish this next generation a life that will be rich in invitation and inclusiveness. Thank you so much.
That was really very special, Eleanor. Thank you so much. We have memories of tonight and stories we can tell of tonight now. And we're beginning to draw toward the end of the